Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Wild Health Podcast. I'm Steve, back again for the third time. They've allowed me to continue this madness of podcasting with our health coaches, and I am super excited today to be joined by one of my very good friends and fellow health coach, premium health coach. Let's not forget that, Michelle Miller. Michelle, welcome. Good to see you today. I miss seeing you, and actually looking forward to seeing you soon in person.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. So glad to be back on the podcast. It's been a while, so I think I'm a little overdue.
Great. So today we're going to jump into talking about, we're just calling it playing the long game, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about that and introduce that a bit more, but let's talk about you, Michelle. Tell the listeners, they've heard you on here before, but maybe they're new, maybe they forget, maybe they just want to know more about you because they're curious. Tell the listeners about what your journey is kind of up to this point, just a quick overview of you, your background, and then we'll jump right into the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, so I've been with Wild Health for just over 2 years. You and I started on the exact same day. I think you were one of the first faces I saw. Yes.
I think you were the first face I saw.
Yeah, I mean, you and Julia. So yeah, it's been a great journey. So I am coming at this from a traditional medical field practice. I've been an RN since 2010 and have always loved that opportunity. I've worked with people, across the lifespan, sick and injured, but, slowly over time, as I worked within that system, felt like I didn't have the ability or the skills or the time or the training to help people improve their health. And I felt like a healthcare system should be doing some of that. And I can't remember exactly what the moment was, but there was a time in there when I heard that quote from Desmond Tutu that says, at some point we need to go upstream and find out why people are falling in the river instead of just continuing to pull them out. Like, what are we going to do preventatively to help people in our nation, in our world, get healthier? We need to raise the tides collectively and expect better and expect more. And I kind of wanted to be a part of that. It was coming out of COVID and managing clinics. And I think, suffering now in retrospect from a true burnout period in my life and needed to switch it up. So found Wild Health through their affiliation with CrossFit. CrossFit has played a really instrumental role in improving my health. Just like you, Steve, I'm coming from a CrossFit background. I started in 2016 in just an effort to a get in shape program after having 3 kids and sort of losing myself and my fitness throughout that process. And it was totally life changing. And I found a community and I found, skills within me that I didn't know that I had. And I continue to grow those today. So it's been about 8 years for me. And I did my level 1 in 2018 and really in an effort just to learn more about this process. Like, what is this thing? Because somebody pretty brilliant put together this exercise approach. It's way different than anything I've ever experienced before. And I was an athlete in high school and college, and I ran cross country. I rode on the crew team in college, and I felt like I was always an athlete, but then sort of lost my ability to do that once I became an adult. And anyway, yeah, CrossFit has really helped me find that. And I really wanted to be a part of that community. So I've gotten my L1 and my L2 I got in February of this year. So I have some skills to kind of help train people in that methodology. But overall, I spend most of my time here at Wild Health, health coaching and helping people with mindset and thinking about their health more holistically. And just making, improvements, 1% improvements every day that help them achieve that future better version of themselves that we're all reaching for.
We should probably clip that and just put that in the tagline as to what a health coach is and what we do, because it's funny, like when you and I do those intro calls with people, the first initial coaching call with a patient or a client, like we're always explaining what health coaching is, because it's such a broad term. I mean, even when I looked into getting this job and applying for it, I don't know if I truly knew exactly what it was. I kind of had an idea of what I thought that we were going to do in this, but that's been molded over the years. And I think exactly like you said, we're keepers of habit change and behavior change. And we're fortunate here with Wild Health to have a lot of data and other skills that we are able to acquire through the learning and opportunities they provide us, and the technology and data to just enhance that even more. Right. And I mean, I think that's really where the basis of today's conversation starts, is you and I and all our health coaches and our physicians, on the outside, people see Wild Health and they're like, wow, I can test my genetics. I can get my epigenetics tested. I can do extensive blood work. That's going to tell me everything I need to know. And I mean, I thought that in the beginning. I was like, that's going to give me all the answers. And then, you get those answers and you're left sitting there like, well, now what do I do? And I always tell people, like, that's where a health coach steps in. That's where, our brilliant physicians give you all this information. And they know this. We've heard our physicians say it multiple times on this very podcast, like, health coaching is where the magic's going to happen after we give you the overview of what all this data actually means. And today, what we're going to talk into is the long-term sustainability of this, because I'm here to tell you there's a big secret into successful health that maybe some people realize and maybe they don't. And I'm not saying this is the only thing. What we're saying today is this is the major thing, and that is consistency of the habits that you're doing in relationship to your health are the thing that will move the needle more than anything else. There are other things that we can and will do, but above all, you have to be consistent. And that sounds so simple, Michelle, but what I want to break down today is how complex that really is and why that's really important.
Awesome. I'm here for that. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. And it's something that you and I have conversations with people all the time. There's short-term goals, there's long-term goals. And at the end of the day, no matter what you come into Wild Health looking for as a patient, the answer is almost always going to be A, it depends, and B, you have to be consistent for a long time. We live in a world today where there are numerous hacks and tips and tricks on things, and take this and do that feel very much like shortcuts. And while I would say there are plenty of great things out there that we even give people advice on that are a quick tip or a quick thing for that, but it all plays into the long-term consistency. Like, I can wake up every day and drink my delicious packet of grapefruit element in my water, and I feel great when I do it. But if I do that 3 days a week, that's not for a week. That's not as impactful as doing it 7 days a week for the next 5 years, 10 years, right? And that's what we're talking about. So from your perspective, let's start right here. How would you define a sustainable approach to health and fitness?
Yeah. So I'm going to just start broad and we can keep dialing in, but
totally.
There's a few elements there that I feel like have to be included in order for it to be long-term. Those elements to me are, it has to be flexible, it has to be practical, and it has to be enjoyable. And yeah, so I'll start there. I mean, in terms of flexibility, we are not living in a vacuum. And a lot of the concepts that people try to apply to humans would be true if we did live in a vacuum. But we do not, because our environment is constantly changing. Our relationships, where we live, where we go, what we eat, how we do things every day. Even if we're really regimented, we still don't live within a vacuum because we have different seasons, like the globe is moving. Everything is constantly changing. And if we want this to be long-term, then we have to have a few elements to our routines that are solid, but they have to all be flexible. And if you lose flexibility, then it's short-term, then you can't do this long-term. And so I think flexibility is a really big piece.
Yeah, I love that.
That second
I love
one,
what you said about losing flexibility. No, you're good. I love what you said about losing flexibility. will only make it short term. And you have to increase flexibility to make it sustainable long term. Like that, I think that's the key takeaway. And just digging into flexibility here, right? That is something that I have seen people discover a lot more as through this process, working with us and tried to work with people on, and even in myself is, okay, like I really am regimented with my nutrition. I'm thinking about these things. And then all of a sudden I go on vacation and I'm stressed about my nutrition. Whereas in recent years, when I've found just relax and be okay with the flexibility of it all, go with the flow, control what you can, all of my data, all of my numbers, minimally impacted in those short moments, as long as you're able to truly be flexible. Because I think the other side of flexibility isn't just like the change to off of your routine, but it's your ability to go back to your routine too, right? Like that's, I think that's where people like break off big time. Is like, I've come off my routine and that's fine. The true, I think, challenge of flexibility is, how do I return to that appropriately?
Exactly. Yes. So you go off of it for a vacation, or you go to a wedding for a weekend, or, you have a family reunion where you partake in all sorts of different festivities. How does that throw you off? Does that mean that your diet is over, or your exercise routine is over, or that you're never going to get back to your normal routine? If that's the truth, then it's not a flexible routine and it's not sustainable. So the true test of a good routine is being able to jump off of it occasionally and do normal things that normal humans do, and then get right back to normal. Sometimes we could probably write a whole scientific paper on this and do all sorts of studies, but
let's do it.
Without that information right now, I'd say it's probably realistically over the course of time about 80-20 rule. I think it'd be better if it was 90-10, but I think 90-10 might be too rigid. And I think I keep coming back to the 80-20 rule, that it's like 80% of my life I live according to what I believe are really healthy guidelines, and I control what I can. And then I think 20% of the time, and it's seasonal. Sometimes I'm way better. Sometimes have a little bit of a harder time just based on, what's going on in my world. But, I think that 80-20 rule supports good health long term.
Yeah. And that is something that people talk about a lot. I think many of our listeners and a lot of people out in the world today focusing on their health think about that. 80-20 is very commonly thrown out there, and they're working towards that, or they think they're doing that. How do you talk to patients about, or even for you yourself, think about like measuring that and it truly being like honest with yourself if you're actually doing that, or if you think you're actually doing that? Because I think that's the thing I've seen a lot of people is they're like, oh, I'm totally 80-20. And then, but then they're, we're working on some of the challenges they're having, some of the struggles, and we're talking through it. And as we get deeper into the conversation, we start to uncover, hey, maybe it's more like 60-40. And I need to be realistic about that. How do you look into measuring that, or where do you dive into that with even yourself or with your patients?
Yeah. So, that's definitely drilling down a little bit. And then it's kind of using 80-20 as the golden rule. And now we're all of a sudden becoming very humanistic about it and wanting to actually measure and have outcomes and all these things. And there's some value to that, because we need a little dopamine hit by checking the box and reaching our goals. And that's okay. But if you do want to do that, just to see where you're at and get a sense, like put a pulse on your lifestyle. If we were let's talk about meals. If you eat 3 meals a day, you have about 21 meals a week. And so you can have, if it's 80% of the time you're eating healthy, that means you have 3 point something cheat meals per week. If you want to cheat, if you want to say you're cheating, or if you want to say like, hey, I'm going out to dinner, my Friday night's pizza night or whatever. And that means like there are multiple days where you're eating really healthy and on track. You can't have a cheat day every day. You can't have a cheat meal every day. And so people start to like conceive of that a little bit and go, oh, so 3 is not that many per week when you have 21 times to choose how well you're going to eat. 18 it's a lot of times where you're on track. So I think when we talk about it in practical terms like that with people, they go, oh yeah, I'm probably more like 50-50 or 60-40. I could clean it up a little bit. And so then that's helpful. And, but that's really sticking harshly to the 80-20 rule. And I don't know if there's value in that. I think it's helpful to conceive of it though in practical numbers occasionally, just to know where you're at.
Totally. And shout out to a good Friday pizza night. Everybody likes a good pizza on Friday nights occasionally. I'm with you.
Exactly.
But I love that giving some, like, having a real discussion, and a lot of I'm sure you've had very intense conversations with patients where, you're hearing them talk and you're, looking at the work that they're doing and the things that they want to accomplish. And how do we craft a coaching call in a way to discover, hey, maybe we need to look deeper into that, and then start to put like tangible, objective number like that is really helpful for people sometimes to just take a look at it. So you guys out there in listener land, 21 meals a week on average, you can think about that. And it's even fun. Like, I've done the exercise with that, taking it across the whole year. And sometimes that has the opposite effect. We're like, oh, wow, that's actually a lot in a year. And now I don't feel like I have to beat myself up over Christmas and New Year's anymore, because I realize that there actually is more flexibility than I thought as well. Again, absent of the big thing I mentioned earlier, which is flexibility also includes returning to play, going back to those habits, having the plan about that. And so in regards to that, what are some tips that you have or things that you use with you or your patients to get back on track when things go awry and you are forced to be flexible, or even if you planned to be flexible?
Yeah, I think that comes down to the practical side. So flexible was kind of my first point. Is it practical is the next side. And if they're struggling to get back to it, then I need to have the conversation that's like, okay, is this practical? Is this something you can achieve in your life? Are there barriers that we need to talk through? For some people, let's use the Whole30, for example. Let's talk about the Whole30 diet. And I know we're using a lot of, right now we're focusing a little bit on diet. This could be applied to sleep or exercise or mindfulness, but diet's so easy because everybody's kind of familiar with some of these things. So I really love a lot of the concepts in Whole30. What I don't like about the Whole30 is that it's 30. It should be whole 365. But then there's a few things in there that are not practical. And it's this concept of zero. Like, there is zero alcohol and zero processed food, which I love that. But is it practical for everybody long term? And I think that's where it goes wrong. And I think for people who are struggling to get back to their routine, it meant that maybe it wasn't practical and we need to, recreate something in their life to make it more practical. Maybe it's like they were meal prepping every Sunday and they were doing perfectly and they did it for like 3 months, and then they went on vacation and then they came back and they were like, I just can't do that anymore. And I'm like, okay, there was maybe a lack of practicality in continuing that. Let's talk about how you can maybe meal prep throughout the week. Maybe you choose 3 nights per week that you cook. And when you cook, you make breakfast the next day because you're getting the dishes out anyway. Let's be a little bit more flexible in terms of getting the work done in a new way. Goal hasn't changed. You still want to be better about meal prepping and eating healthier, but maybe we need to make your approach more practical. So that's usually where the conversation goes. If it's struggling to get back on track, it's not like, well, just do it. Just get back on track. It's more like, okay, let's talk through what some of these basic underpinnings may be that are causing you not to want to get back on track.
Yeah. Figuring out the barriers right there is exactly what I'm hearing from you. And you mentioned something that I think is, brings some thoughts to mind, just like own personal example here. Like, when I first got into thinking about nutrition, when I started CrossFit over 10 years ago, it was like, cool, paleo diet. That's what we do. We look at all the ingredients. If it's not from Mother Earth, it's trash. I'll never eat it. My face will melt if I do it. Right. And so, like, really into that. And that got me really into meal prep. And every Sunday, when we lived in our old townhouse down the street, my neighbors could tell you, like, they'd come over smelling, like, man, what's he doing? Cooking up something every single Sunday for 3-4 hours, like, very elaborate. And I was very dedicated to that. And then life evolves and you get married, you have kids. I have 2 beautiful, lovely kids. And I would much rather play outside with them on Sundays than live in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And so that was a realization for me with my health coach. Like, hey, I'm really failing at this meal prep thing. And so it was like, well, you need to come up with more convenient food items. Stop being so elaborate with your cooking. Simplify things, and there were barriers that came up there and different things to talk through. But the long and short of it was, that was a big realization for me that, like, you know, I don't know if some people have ever heard this, but like, you don't actually have to meal prep. It's extremely helpful for a lot of people. And it is one way to get to that nutrition goal that you have, but it's not the only way. And I think that is the message that I think we want people to hear, is like, there is not just one way. It's not only meal prep on Sunday. It's not only cook, more food throughout the week or whatever. There are multiple ways to get there. And when you hit the barrier, don't feel, and the meal prep, for example, is not working, pivot and let's figure out the next thing that's going to work.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. So, I mean, meal services are something that we talk about. Having multiple, I like to think of tools in the toolbox. Like, I will, if I do meal prep, I'll try to always freeze something. So I have like this arsenal of food that's available. I mean, a lot of my life revolves around food because I have 3 kids too, 2 teenage boys and a 10-year-old daughter. I mean, if I'm behind the 8 ball on food, it can be a huge blowout for me personally, for my goals. Most of the time, everyone else gets fed, but it will result in some type of pizza or something that really can throw me off for a whole week because I feel bad or get a bad night's sleep and then get up and can't work out, or I miss. So, it really can be a wrench in the wheel. And so that's the motivator for me to continue. So the third thing maybe I did mention this, but is enjoyable. Like, this has to be enjoyable. And for most people, at first they're like, this is not enjoyable. Like, I think that eating Cheetos is enjoyable, but I am at the point in my health where that is not enjoyable. I feel so bad. It throws a wrench in my routine, and it feels good to feel good. So when you get to that point where that's the motivating driver, is like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go back to that place where I felt like I was always scrambling and I didn't know when I was going to make it to the gym. And, you can get to this place where it flows out of you. It's a part of your routine and your identity. And then it's not so much work. It's something that you enjoy doing because it actually serves you. It serves your routine and your identity in a really positive way.
I'm going to break the rules here and interject my opinion rather than state facts and read from a study on anything. So I apologize to anybody in Wild Health Land who I should not be interjecting my opinion. But of the 3 things you mentioned, flexibility, practicality, and enjoyable, I so feel compelled right now that out of all habits and goals people work on, that enjoyable might be the bedrock of that. Right. Like, and I'm thinking, I'll give you a couple examples here and we can talk about yours. I think it would be great for listeners to hear some things here on this. Is we've been mentioning nutrition, but I think of exercise. Like, me, I love anything that has the label CrossFit on it. And so because I love it so much and it's enjoyable to me and I really love it, I've been able to be consistent for over 12 years. There's been very few long bouts without exercise in my life since finding CrossFit. Prior to that, there's ups and downs like everybody else had. And so my message to people on that is in the exercise example, find the thing you enjoy. It doesn't have to be CrossFit. If you love to ruck, you should ruck more. Yes. If you love to lift weights, you should lift weights more. You have to also make sure those are aligned with your health goals, right? Like, if we're saying that, or if you're feeling compelled and your healthcare team are working with you on, building bone mass and strength, as a priority for aging and longevity, you have to be realistic and know that running every day isn't going to get you there. But if you love running, you should do a lot of that, and you can flip your exercise routine. So many times people are like, Steve, I want to spend our call today talking about the optimal exercise routine based on my genetics and blood work. And I'm like, great. What do you like to do? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you like to do? Because yeah, sure, your genetics favor you to lift weights a little bit more. Do you like doing that? Because you should do it. But maybe instead of 3 to 4 days a week of lifting, maybe you do 1 to 2 and you spend more time out hiking, which is what you really love. Enjoyable to me feels very much like the foundation. It's like your nighttime sleep routine, right? Listen, I know that sleep is important. I realize that I should be getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But you know what I enjoy a little bit more and sometimes sacrifice sleep for is connecting with my wife at night. And I sacrifice sleep for that often. And I think that is equally valuable sometimes, because that makes my nighttime routine enjoyable. If I'm like, oh, honey, we can't, sit down and play Parcheesi tonight, or, watch our favorite Netflix show because I got to get my 8 hours of sleep because my Whoop told me to. So see you later. Like, that doesn't feel enjoyable
Exactly.
to me, even though it is quote unquote optimizing my health. So sorry for the rant on the opinion, but I feel compelled that enjoyable matters a lot, the way, and especially the way you explain that is the bedrock of this whole thing.
Yeah. And a lot of people come to us and they're like, there's this disconnect. They're like, oh, I think I know you're going to tell me I've got to do a bunch of things that I don't want to do. And I'm like, we need a full mindset rehaul. I do recognize that it's going to take time to transition from what you currently feel like is enjoyable, but is keeping you from reaching your health goals, to living a life that you feel like is enjoyable, but it does help you reach your health goals. Like, I think in both of those situations, there's this conception of joy and feeling enjoyment out of a lifestyle, but one of them slowly sort of like makes you fall away from what you believe is your best version of yourself. And one of them you're enjoying and you're getting better every day. So like, if you're feeling like there's a disconnect there, then there probably is. And it can exist that both of those happen at the same time. That's the goal. How to get there is going to be different for every individual. That's why I love health coaching so much, because I get to hear people's stories and talk with them. And really, it's this conversation that opens up between two people where they come to their own conclusion. They see for the first time that something just pops out of their mouth and they're like, oh, I just had this huge aha moment. And as the health coach, I'm really just sitting there listening. And it's a really powerful opportunity to talk about health. So I can't go into specifics and exactly, how to go from this one version of yourself that's like not reaching your health goals to this one version of yourself that is, but you can get there. It can be both ways.
Yeah. And it's such a huge component to solving that, is discovering who you want to be, why you want to be that person, and then crafting the goals based on that vision of the person that you want to be. And I think, this all plays into the big picture of sustainable long-term success, which is what we're talking about today. Is it has to be enjoyable. You got to make it practical. We need to be flexible. And so the first thing that people listening can do is just evaluate those three things. Look at your health habits and your goals. And if you're patients at Wild Health, talk to your health coach about these things. We're here. We're happy to kind of break that down and make sure that you're doing those things so that you can see yourself doing the habits you're doing for the next 10, 15, 20 years to get those long-term sustainable results. I don't want to brush off the fact that there are going to be days and times where you do need to make sacrifices and you do need to work really hard and do something that maybe doesn't feel like you want to do, but that shouldn't be the norm every day. As much as I love, again, CrossFit, working out, are there days where I wake up? Today was a good day, example of that, where I was like, it's hot out. I don't want to train. It's going to be really hot in that garage today. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I will feel better and the rest of the day will go well if I do that. Despite enjoying working out, there are barriers that always come up. And so I don't want to discount that. Like, people think it should just be perfect every day. Like, there are going to be days where you don't want to cook a healthy meal. There are going to be days when you don't want to work out. You don't want to follow your routine. But the overarching theme is that you do generally enjoy it.
Yeah. And so interestingly, I think that you and I both agree on one concept we haven't really talked about too much yet, but that what got you there on the day you didn't want to go to the gym was most likely the people or your community or somebody who knew you were going to be there. Or sometimes I'm kind of tired and I don't want to go, but I feel like I don't have a choice. I actually must go because of the amount of crap I would get from good friends or from my coach, or, I'm really wrapped into this thing, and it is helping to improve me despite myself, even if I don't want to go sometimes. And I also remind myself constantly, like, I have never gone to the gym and wish that I hadn't gone. I have always gone. So glad I went today. I always leave feeling better. I always, have like an endorphin rush and a bunch of energy. And I feel grateful for my community and things like that. So you can build in these sort of constructs that help you to succeed despite yourself, despite the fact that sometimes your motivation will wane. And that's when you're really winning, because it is a give and take. It's an up and down. The seasons come and go, and you're not always going to be motivated just by the sheer enjoyment of it. Most of the time you're going to like have these up and down days. So building out a community, finding a group of people who share a mindset, I think is a really big piece of that.
Totally. And you can use that example for any habit change somebody's looking for, whether it's nutrition and you've got a group of people online or around the neighborhood or the community or friends that you can talk to about recipes and food and even enjoy meals together.
Yes.
You can do the same thing with even sleep habits. I mean, I think that's part of where we're at with even like the online stuff. And here at Wild Health is this is a community for our patients. We want this to be a place where people can chat with us about the things and feel accountable to each other on the things that we're trying to do. Like I know our coaches, when every time we have a challenge or something, like I average about 10,000 steps a day. And then when we do a step challenge, all of a sudden it's 25,000. It's like you throw a little accountability to some other people in there and you're like, okay, I can get this done. And so like, that is something people should keep in mind. And if you're out there, plugging away on your own and you're struggling, find someone or a community of like-minded people, whether it's online or in person, to, come together with and have that accountability. It could even just be inviting somebody who that isn't working on those things and wants to, and now you're helping them. I think there's so many ways to craft that. So I love that message. That was, super, super powerful there, and something I think people can take away from this. One thing that has been on my mind a lot that, it's an obvious thing I'm going to say, but I want to unpack this with you a little bit. And it's this idea of, okay, people may start to recognize when we talk to them about it or we help them unpack this idea of, hey, look, I know that you want to move your cholesterol numbers through nutrition and you're really dedicated to that and you want to get your A1C down and all of these things. And you get them to realize this is a 12-month thing that you really need to be consistent for a long period of time. And then continue that for the rest of your life to keep it where it needs to be for your health, right? And you're motivated to do that. But there's still this word or this thing that comes up that is people try to rush the process, even though they're like, okay, it's 12 months, but there's like, how can I rush that process? And like, what came to mind for me when I was thinking about this before we hopped on here was in fitness. And in general, I see this all the time where you get really motivated and you get really into lifting weights, for example, and you're back squatting. And the first week you squat five reps for 55 pounds and you get the newbie gains. And the next week you come in and you're like, cool, now I got 75. Now all of a sudden that's 3 weeks later, 150. And that sounds really cool to make those gains. And then a year in, you've topped out and now you're in these higher end weights and you're rushing this process of strength for longevity and you're getting injured because you're overdoing it. That's something I see a lot in fitness. And one of the things that I have really started to think a lot about in terms of rushing the fitness process is encouraging people to slow down in the beginning or just in general. And like, hey, like imagine if only every month you added 5 more pounds to an exercise in a month or two instead of 20 pounds trying to get there quick. What would that look like consistently in a year versus just spiking into it? And it's something that I sort of accidentally did for myself, was like super hesitant. I was always overanalyzing CrossFit in the beginning because I had this exercise physiology degree and thought I knew everything. And so these things are dumb. You shouldn't combine things like that, but I'll do it because I'm really bad at it and I need to get better. And that led me to really slowly doing things. And years later, like I have avoided burnout in fitness, and nutrition I think is a part of that as well, as a result of just playing it slow and just climbing slowly over the years versus like, okay, I just started CrossFit, I need to get a muscle up next week. It's like, hey, like, maybe you should get a pull up first, So anyway, all that to say is I'm rambling a little bit, but the question I have for you is, how do you help folks, or even if you have examples of yourself, slow down and not rush the process in any habit that they're doing? What do we think about here? How do we reel that in a way that truly makes us understand to enjoy the process and keep it sustainable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so good because we all deal with this in some way or another. And, if you're at the beginning of the spectrum and you're just starting to build an exercise routine and you're feeling, maybe discouraged because the results are not coming as fast as you want them to come. And this happens. I think this is a really big disconnect in the human psyche is that our expectation of results are always way faster than they come in reality. And in that time period, we waver and then we fail because we don't feel like it's working and we change something up and then we don't give that enough time to work. And then we change it up again and don't give that enough time to work. And then we come here at this point in time and say nothing is working when really any one of those would probably have worked if we just had waited a little bit longer. So being patient, slowing down, trusting the process. There are a few things that you can do to help that. Like, I do think in that situation, there's value in little checklists because what we're needing is a little reward. We need some type of a dopamine hit that says, hey, you are succeeding. Because it doesn't come as fast as we want it to when it comes to fitness or even nutrition. Our body is just slow to change and evolve. And I'm grateful for that. For the other side of the spectrum is it's also slow to go backwards. It really loves homeostasis and it is going to stay there as much as possible. So it just takes a long time to nudge it in any direction. But, sometimes having like a checklist that's like, I went to the gym today, period. I don't care what you did there or what, your examples are of like loading the bar more and getting new PRs. And that's exciting. That is a huge dopamine hit. So people who get that helps to continue the process for them. But if they don't, let's say they just went to the gym and it was hard and they didn't really love it, like the check mark that they did that day can sometimes be enough to keep them going. And then they look at a week and then they look at a month and they go, look how many times I've gone. That's awesome. Then at the other side of the spectrum is where people like you're using as an example of people who you slow down the process for you. And if you're really patient, you still get PRs. Well, I'm, in my 40s and people in their 50s, I'm starting to get to the point where I can't really get my PRs anymore and everything. Like I still show up every day. I'm working, not every day, but every day I intend to go 4 to 5 days per week and to actual CrossFit. I feel like, I'd still really love to get an occasional PR and I do, but sometimes I can't even get to my PR and I'm like, a little discouraged. I'm not going to lie. That's, there's a lot of work and a lot of days that go in. So in that situation, I love Wild Health for that because I can use my blood work as motivation. Like then I can start to see other facets of my health that are like, oh, look at all the things that are benefiting from the work that I'm putting in the gym. And sometimes I just need a little slap in the face to be like, you're going, but maybe you should go harder, like, okay, yeah, you're right. I got a little comfortable. Maybe I should be working a little bit harder. And so having those other check marks, like labs, even getting on a DEXA scanner, you could do an impedance scan too, but getting a sense of body composition and seeing a little bit improvement in muscle mass over time or seeing bone density improve for women. Like those are really great indicators that you're on the right track. And they're not as quick as a quick win that we all need, a dopamine hit, but you can build those into your routine so that you can at least check the box occasionally. And I do think that that's important for all humans.
Yeah, I love the idea of just refocusing on other things going on. Zoom out and say, okay, I didn't hit what I wanted to in the gym today, but what else is going well in my life that I can focus on? Like an example of Wild Health, look at your blood work. You can really drive things there with the things you're doing in the gym. Yeah. The DEXA scan, any area where you can see improvement, even if for me, a lot of times it's like, okay, yeah, didn't hit what I wanted to in the gym, but man, like hour later, I feel awesome, feel great. I'm just more energy, all of those things. For me, a lot of times that just I always bring myself back to those moments where I'll pause outside with the kids and be like, hey, I can run around without pain and do a lot of things with these kids and keep up. And that's great. And I want to continue that. You were mentioning like people as they get older. And we have a lot of patients, big population focusing on longevity, and they're in this for the long haul. Their goal is this sustainability and to find a health routine that we can help them track, and that is both preventative, but also creating health span where they can be functional, mobile, and healthy into their later years. And this is something that I started doing for some of the people I was training in person, and talked to some clients about this at Wild Health. Is like, hey, listen, if you're somebody who lifted weights and was an athlete in your teens and 20s and 30s, and you get to 40 and 50, you can't compare yourself, right? And so if you want to create this reward system for yourself, do it by decade. When you turn 40, all right, from 40 to 49, it's a blank slate again. So you establish at 40 what those running PRs are, what those pull-up PRs are, what they are. You turn 50, blank slate again. We go again. You turn 60, blank slate. And you can do that and apply that with a lot of things in a way where you can continue to create these wins, which sort of segues me into the next thing I wanted to unpack with you. Probably one of the last things here, but really important, is just this idea of setting, and you mentioned it with the realistic part of this, but I want to dive into goal setting and setting realistic goals. And I want to start with a story and then have you unpack this for me. Okay. So it's something that I know you and I work with a lot of people on. Is we hear their goals, and then you have these reoccurring calls every 3-4 weeks or whatever you're doing with somebody, and you're constantly having the conversation with them. They're having the conversation with you of, oh man, Steve, I just didn't nail it again. I didn't nail it again. And it's like, okay, at what point do we need to reassess this goal? And the reassessment should be, sometimes you need to set the bar so low just so you can get that win. And here's a story example. I was working with a patient, and he really wanted to begin a routine at the gym. He wanted to work out so bad. He was really into the latest and greatest podcasts, and he, heard Peter Attia talk about the importance of strength training and grip strength and VO2 max. And he's like, I want to do this. And every time we meet, I have not gone to the gym. I still haven't done it. And he had this goal of 3 to 4 days a week of strength training, 2 days of zone 2, and pretty elaborate goal. And finally, at one point during the conversation, I was like, okay, let's bring the goal down, set something lower. And, we finally just cashed it out to the point over several calls where the goal became, one day this week, drive to the gym, walk inside, and then leave. And you win.
Yes.
Period. And I remember leaving that call, I feel like he's going to be really discouraged. And he comes back after a meeting and he's like, Steve, I did it. I went in.
You did it.
I said, did you do anything? He said, I didn't do anything. I left. Okay, cool. That's fine. So then next time, let's go walk on the treadmill for 15 minutes and listen to your podcast that you like to listen to. Okay, cool. He goes in. Let's listen to the podcast. We walk, comes back. Hey, I did it, but I actually did that twice. Cool. And before you know it, over time, he's starting to just relate that is a good place for him. And now I want to explore the strength training. But the goal was so unrealistic that he was continually feeling depressed and failing this lofty goal he had of, even we had it down to work out 1 day a week. And we couldn't do that, and was being unsuccessful, and just, it wasn't working.
I love it. Okay. Yeah. So, we haven't even mentioned James Clear yet, but he's the absolute current leader in everything that has to do with habits and human behavior in terms of habit formation. And it's so awesome. And he has a quote that I will forever have memorized because it's really impactful for me. And he says, we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. So how are we going to build a system to make sure that we reach our goal, which, if we'd like to change that word to vision, I think that's helpful, because really we have a vision of ourselves. We have a vision of what we want our life to look like. What we need to do is make a goal of creating a system to achieve that vision. So when we kind of break it down in that way, it's a perfect example. He actually, James Clear, uses a similar example for one of his clients. I can't remember exactly how he described it, but at first the goal was just to drive to the gym, like 3 days a week. You drive there and then you spend more time, exactly like you said, Steve. It was fantastic. And what that's doing is it's building a system. It's creating this routine in this person's life that feels easy, feels achievable. It's like, oh, this is something I do just on a regular basis. You create a system of just driving to the gym, let alone what you're going to start doing once you move your body and then you get related. You make relationships with people in the gym, and then you start to actually see improvements, and all these things start to build out of that system. So you can spend a lot of time setting goals. And I think that's important for the vision part of it. When you set a goal, you're thinking about who you want to be. When you're setting a goal, you're thinking about what you want out of your life. And that's important, that vision casting, because if you're not in touch with what you want, then it's going to be really hard to get there. But then the goal should focus on, how are we going to build this? What is it going to look like in the day-to-day basis? And if it's just driving to the gym, or if it's just like, setting an alarm reminder to go to bed at an exact same time every night. Maybe you don't fall asleep, but you just get in bed same time each night. You start this routine. That's when things start to kind of grow out of what seems like these little menial parts of our life that almost do nothing. But that is where the results come from. And that's where the consistency comes from. And it's practical. And then hopefully the joy starts to grow out of it, because you're getting some results and you're feeling good. And that's where the enjoyable side comes in. And then if it's truly a routine and a habit, then it will be flexible. You'll be able to go off on vacation and don't drive to the gym 3 days a week or 4 days a week or whatever it is, but you come back and you're like, that's what you know. So you get right back into it. Almost effortless.
Yeah, man, I love that. And
so
shout out to James Clear.
Answered your question. Yeah, amazing work. I really appreciate everything he does, and I have soaked a lot of it up.
Yeah, you absolutely answered the question there, and did a way better job of not rambling like I do. So thanks for making this a much more organized conversation. So I think the last thing here, and then I have a fun question at the end just for us to chat about. I always like to do fun things. At least I think they're fun. People might think they're silly, but I think it's fun. But all of this long-term sustainability talk, you hit some major things, and I'll recap it all in a minute. But the last thing I want to get your thoughts on is, how should people monitor this, right? So like, okay, Michelle, I'm working with you, and we've come to the realization that this has got to be a long-term thing. I want this exercise and nutrition and sleep plan we've come up with to be something that I feel comfortable doing for the next 40 years. As we're going through this, I'm feeling good about it, but how do I monitor? What am I looking for? Signs that it's going well and signs that it's not going well. And how do we monitor and measure that?
Yeah. And I think that's really important, because like you alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, we can kind of guesstimate, the 80-20 rule, but we seem to be really relaxed, usually, in overestimating how good we've been, when we're also harsh critics on ourselves in other ways. But so I do think it's important every once in a while to sort of look under the hood and see exactly what's going on. And with no intentional plug to Wild Health, of course, I love what we do here, but really it is so helpful at being able to have a team of people who help you to evaluate if this is working. It helps in a lot of ways, but especially in terms of biomarkers and knowing if your supplements are on point and your nutrition is on point, and your exercise too. But then having some type of, system to monitor progress in terms of fitness is important too. So VO2 max testing is a really great way that Peter Attia recommends testing VO2 max to assess for health span and longevity. Body mass index or doing a DEXA. You can do measurements. A lot of people get a lot of value out of measurements. And I think that's a really great standard way to just know what's going on with your body. Pictures. Although if we're talking about over 40 years, excuse me, it's going to be maybe a little bit discouraging over like a really long period of time to look at pictures, because inevitably there will be decline. Yeah. And then how you feel. Like, I think that you mentioned this a little bit ago, but just being able to do things that you want to do, to run around with your kids, to have energy to do special projects. And that's where the mindfulness / journaling / slowing down and taking a few minutes to see where you're at in life and really kind of giving yourself an evaluation. I do like to ask the question occasionally to my patients, on a scale of 0 to 10, like, how close are you to achieving your health goals? Like, where do you feel like you fall today? And everybody gets that. They're like, I am a 6 or I am an 8. Actually, and sometimes they surprise themselves in answering the question. Actually, I think I'm about an 8. And that's probably because they came to the meeting really wanting to dial into all the things that aren't going right. And they're frustrated about, and they're like, oh, I want to talk to Michelle about this. And then we actually look at that question and it's sort of this, oh, wait, actually, I think I'm doing pretty well. So I think that people can just kind of do that, scale themselves 0 to 10 every once in a while. Maybe once a year, you have a journal, you ask yourself this question and you answer it objectively.
Love it. Thanks for taking us through how to monitor that, because I think it's so important that people have an understanding of how to track their progress and when to reassess. And hey, shameless plug, but get yourself a health coach if you don't have one. We all have one. And it is so valuable to have at least somebody in your life to bounce these ideas off of and to check in and help you just unpack your thoughts on these things. So Michelle, appreciate the conversation. So I think the big take home message here with long-term sustainability, I love the theme you gave us here of the 3 things, which is, okay, your sustainable health habits need to be flexible. They need to be practical. And in my humble opinion, most importantly, enjoyable in a lot of ways. And if you guys are sitting at home and you're listening to this and you're thinking about habits that you want to do or things you're struggling with, or even, hey, things are going well, still assess those things, because you want to predict ahead to those roadblocks and barriers coming up. And so is your plan flexible? Is it practical? Is it enjoyable for you? And that can be a great reflection, maybe a journaling opportunity to reflect on some things, and maybe schedule an appointment with your health coach if you haven't seen him in a while. We're looking forward to talking to you, and we can talk about that. The last and final question I have, Michelle, awesome. I'm going to make you think here. Since you started your journey with Wild Health, what do you think is the most impactful health habit change of any kind that you've done since assessing your genetics and blood work, meeting with your physician and health coach? There's probably a lot, but if you could pick the one that's standing out to you right now, what would that be? And I'll go first if you want.
I think I know what it is. I think it's learning to value recovery as much as I value hard work. You know, I was definitely like over grinding myself in an effort to just like get fitter and fitter and fitter, and not really seeing those amazing results. I mean, I'm not like a competitive athlete or anything. But, you know, I think it was out of that self-efficacy drive, like wanting to be the best I could be, but not knowing when I was having diminishing returns because I wasn't recovering. So specifically sleep. I think that at one point, Carl was like, why aren't you spending more time working on your sleep? This is a foundational part of your life. And really, I had gotten to the point in my life, in order to get to myself to the gym for the 6 a.m. class, I had to get up at 5:15 on a regular basis. And I'm not a morning person. And so my mantra was that I can sleep when I'm dead. And I did come to Wild Health with that mentality, and he pretty much rocked my world. And I have put more effort into sleep and recovery than I think ever in my life. And I'm definitely feeling the results of that in a really positive way. And I didn't lose all my fitness. Like I have dialed things down. I found a better balance, but it was definitely a hard pill to swallow at first, because that's not what I wanted to work on. That's not what I came hoping to hear. So yeah, I'd say that's the answer for me. What about you?
Yeah, for me, I think the one thing that has had the most positive impact on my health is just becoming aware that it is not all about physical health. And so while I'm not the most meditative person or I guess mindful person, but just observing ways to, realizing how valuable things like connection are to your health, right? I talked about that earlier where it's like, hey, and I'm very guilty of this, getting super caught up in the physical component of this all. And it's actually something I'm working hard on now is the mental component of things and doing some deeper work on that because it is equally important. And I think people don't always realize until a conversation with your doctor like Carl has had with me. Shout out to Carl. We just outed him on being our
changing lives,
changing
one health
lives
coach
here.
at a time.
But making me realize that you got to do the work on yourself too, not just the physical part, and spend more time on the other side. And I think while that maybe hasn't impacted quite yet for me, I think I'm feeling that is where my shift is going. And I think that will have, when it's all said and done, the greatest impact on me.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a great battlefield of the mind, this whole life journey, right?
Totally.
Got to work on the mind.
Well, Michelle, it's always a pleasure. Can't wait to see you in person soon and all of our other friends.
Yeah.
Love our conversation today. And if you guys out there in listener land have any, you need some help with this, schedule an appointment with your health coach if you're a patient. If you're not, feel free to come sign up with us and understand that while we do the extensive testing and that stuff is so amazing and will help you on your health journey, the magic happens when you find ways to make it flexible, practical, and enjoyable. For Michelle Miller, I'm Steve Weatherholt, and you're listening to the Wild Health Podcast. See you guys.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.